What do you do in this setting I've been describing anyway? Maybe it would be a good idea if I turn some of my blog posts, if you will, into a YouTube series where I discuss potential campaigns I would run, how I plan for campaigns, and all that jazz. But let me start with my 4 iconic characters. It's an idea that I took from Paizo, who also has iconic characters. I think, in Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition did it as well, with the characters that they had illustrated in the player's handbook and the other core rulebook, well, in all the rule books, really. And then they also actually wrote novels about each of them. But I only have 4. And then I'm going to discuss my 4 actual PCs that my son, my son-in-law, my daughter, and my daughter-in-law all created. And we started a campaign. We didn't get very far with it yet, but they did create 4, 1 character each. And so I'll talk about them as well. The first and the mainest, I guess, maybe of my iconics, the first one that I really came up with is Dominic Clevenger. He is a member of, or he was, I should say, a member of the Ranger Corps, which is a kind of like the Bounders. They run around throughout the hill country. They are not politically aligned, so it doesn't matter which city, state, or village, or hamlet, or wherever they are in the hill country. Their writ, if you will, their roving commission, is to protect the hill country from any enemies, foreign and domestic, that they may discover within it. Now, Dominic was actually a member of the Shadow Division of the Ranger Corps, which they don't officially acknowledge that it exists, but it does. They're kind of like the X-Files of the Rangers. And so that's kind of what my characters will be doing. The iconic characters are freelance. Dominic is now retired and he does this freelance. So they're freelance supernatural bounty hunters, maybe you could say. Or if you want to think of them this way, they're like the hunters from the Supernatural show, Dean and Sam Winchester. So here is Dominic. He's a tall guy, mid to maybe late 20s, blonde hair, green eyes, wears leathers everywhere he goes, carries a cavalry saber and a bow, and iconically always wears a coonskin cap when he's out and about. And I kind of gave you his background already. He actually left the Ranger Corps when he discovered that there was a very senior and well-respected ranger who was corrupt, and he had to bring him down. The Ranger leadership decided to kind of hush up the details of that, and so a lot of people don't know that this guy was corrupt. And so Dominic has both really good friends and also a lot of people who don't like him within the Ranger Corps. And I think a lot of them in particular don't like him that now he's freelance and not under the control of their leadership. Dominic's best friend is this gray man here named Kimnor Rugova, who is from Lomar. He also has a bit of a dark past. He was very close to being engaged to a lovely young lady of Lomar who fell victim to the rarely appearing curse of the Hyperboreans, where they must partake of human flesh, humanoid or demi-human, or they must become cannibals, or they will turn into ghouls and also become cannibals. So it is obviously very illegal to do that, even in Lomar, where the majority population is Hyperborean, because it's mostly made up of the Zobnans, who are fairly civilized people. They see the curse as a curse, and if somebody falls victim to it, they are declared legally dead and are executed before they can harm the community. So Kimnor left Lomar. He is kind of bitter about how that all went down. I'm not sure what he thought exactly he was going to do. Nobody has found a cure for the curse, but he hoped that he would. Anyway, to cover up his kind of cynicism and bitterness, he parties a little too hard, if you will, and kind of has this cynical, sarcastic personality but it's definitely edgy. It's not fun. It can seem fun, but there's definitely an edge underneath it. The other 2 members of the iconic PC party, although I actually think that I would have them split up into 2 pairs for most things, is Ragnar Clevenger, Dominic's older brother. He was also involved in the outing of this other ranger guy, so he also left the Ranger Corps. 2 of them had been partners while they were working there, and they went solo. Dominic ended up with Kimnor. Ragnar was up in the countryside and went vampire hunting, and there's a poor young girl, very pretty, very, very feminine, who was a victim of this vampire. But he didn't completely kill her, and he managed to chase the vampire off. She became, therefore, a dhampir, a kind of half vampire, where the attacks and the feeding of the vampire were starting to transform her, but that process was halted before it went all the way. So she is now a dhampir. They are actually now married. She's quite young. She's maybe 20. Ragnar's a little bit older than Dominic, so he's late 20s. So they're close to 10 years apart. But that wasn't too unusual, even a couple generations ago in our country, so it would make a lot of sense during the period that Dark Fantasy X takes place in. Anyway, so that's kind of those two. There's Kaylin is Clevenger, which is her last name now because they're married, is this girl. When she became a dhampir, even though her father was a fairly important man in the town that she grew up in, they kind of just decided that it would not be good for her to stay, that the neighbors would be uncomfortable around her all the time, that it was going to be bad news. So And she had kind of fallen in love with the dashing ranger who rescued her. So they got married and they left. And she has trained to try and become a ranger as well because she's now a dhampir. Some of her abilities are heightened and enhanced. And even though she's a young, feminine girl, she's capable because of that. And so she's every bit Ragnar's equal when it comes to at least some of the things that they need to do, although she definitely defers to his greater experience and knowledge about the art of hunting. So those are my 4 iconics. I also have 4 PCs that were created again by my son, my daughter, and their spouses for the game that I started running. I don't know exactly what's going to happen with that. I'm going to be relocating several states over soon, so maybe we'll see if we can get it rolling again online once we're settled, but it's possible that the game kind of will come to an end because of our relocation, in which case these guys can just become an alternate pack of iconics, I guess. First we have Faye Findale, who is my daughter-in-law's character. She is an orphan, a runaway, kind of. She's tall, slim, has long auburn hair, blue eyes. She's kind of sneaky and scholarly. I imagine if we get this far that I will, and she doesn't die or nothing, something else doesn't happen to her, that it will come out that she's actually not an orphan. Her parents faked their deaths and ran off. I'm not quite sure why they did this or what will become of it, but it should be kind of fun when she discovers them and that they're bad. My son created the character Khazar, who is an orc. He took, as I said last time, he took Shul as his contact, and if you take him, it unlocks the orc and goblin races for starting characters. He's the only one who created a non-human. His idea of Khazar is that he's kind of a Boba Fett or Cad Bane style bounty hunter, kind of a semi-villainous or at least anti-heroic bounty hunter, very involved in the underworld, kind of a gangster, if you will. But he's, getting caught up in this supernatural stuff, so he may become a hero in spite of everything, or maybe he'll be the guy who causes all kinds of problems for everybody else because he's a bad guy. I don't know. My daughter's character is Aelin Galathinius, another tall, skinny girl. She described her as having a long blonde braid, violet eyes, a little scar on her forehead. She comes originally from a wealthy family, and she's very educated. She had kind of a privileged life, but for whatever reason, she has been alienated from her family and has not seen them in a little while, even though she's still pretty young. I think most of these characters are in their early 20s. Khazar, he said, is about 30, but the 2 girls are in their early to mid 20s. I don't know exactly what Aelin's secret front will be, I guess, but the whole notion that she's alienated from her family suggests that somehow that's going to have to come back to haunt her. The last character is my son-in-law's Tharlix Amos, also known as Ajax for short, who's he described him as kind of middle-aged with graying hair, kind of a dad bod. Kind of Hopper from Stranger Things was sort of his inspiration, who became a bit of a supernatural hunter before even the adventure started. I think he has some kind of PTSD situation. He, I believe, if I remember right, said he was married and had some children, and they were killed in some kind of supernatural incident, and that's when he decided he was going to get rid of the threat once and for all. So I really like how his model turned out. In fact, so does my son-in-law. I said, wow, he's even cooler looking than I imagined. You don't actually see his dad bod very well. He does have it, but just the way he's kind of hunched over and stuff, you can't really tell. Anyway, both the orc and Ajax are shadow swords. They took the shadow sword feat from the class features, and so they can materialize a shadowy weapon out of the ether, if you will. My son's orc does not actually manifest a sword, though. He manifested as a battle axe. The two girls are not like that. They're both a little more roguish, but with kind of a educated bent. They both are either scholarly or educated. I believe my daughter actually intends to try and pursue spell casting once she can find some spells and learn how to cast them. Did not really explain to her quite yet. I mean, I kind of did, but didn't really explain how Lovecraftian magic is in Dark Fantasy X. So we'll see what she thinks about it. I know that in another campaign that she's been in with my son-in-law as the DM, and it's a regular D&D game with her and some of her old co-workers and friends, that she plays a half-orc barbarian, I think, or ranger or something like that. So this is a little bit of a different character for her. Anyway, those are my 4 iconics and my 4 PCs who may become iconics depending on whether or not we're actually able to continue our game once I relocate several states over. I think that we can probably do it. It'll just be a question of does the scheduling become difficult, and it's really hard to get together. Anyway, see you next time.